So the one thing I noticed at the end of that film was it was a film o sound library film, but there was no soundtrack when we scanned it, and there were intertitles. So I'm not sure if that really was meant for sound, was a sound print that was printed also for silent usage, or what. But yeah, sometimes reading the credits, you get to learn a little bit about the history of the film or where the film, how it was made and how it was distributed and stuff like that. Anyways, I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films like we just did. That last film was from the Orgone Archive, which ultimately was from the Mogul Brothers Film Library, which was based in New York, which was a library that rented out film prints for various usage, educational and entertainment. Let's see. So behind me, I have a film scanner set up, and my intern yesterday built up some reels, so we're going to watch some films. This first one, part of the the Beginning Responsibility series. They had kind of a early 60s version of this, and then they redid a bunch of them in the 70s, and this is a 70s one. This is Taking Care of Things You Share. Enjoy.
Once there was a little girl named Isabel, who was a delightful little girl. She loved to listen to music and took very good care of her records. In fact, Isabel took very good care of everything that belonged to her. Isabel thought of everything. Yes, that too. At school, too, she took care of her own things. But as for the things that didn't belong to her, like the school desk, well, that was another story. And the things she shared with the class, she didn't take very good care of them either. For instance, the paste jar.
Hey, this paste is all dried up. Who left the top off of it?
Isabel. Isabel, do you know anything about that paste?
I don't know.
Her teacher wasn't very happy with her.
Isabel.
And neither was the librarian. And what made people unhappy with Isabel at school also made them unhappy at the community center. She never took care of things that didn't belong to her.
Isabel, that's our new soccer ball. Be sure to bring that back when you're through.
Okay.
At home, Isabel wasn't any different. If she was playing records that weren't hers, would she think of putting them away when she started doing something else?
Hey, Isabel, want to skateboard? Wait a minute. Hey, Chris, can I use this skateboard until Dad fixes mine? Okay, but don't you dare leave it outside. I won't, I promise.
Sometimes she left a record on top of the amplifier, which gets very hot. And while Isabel was having fun on her brother's skateboard, she ruined so many records. And when she came home, her thoughtlessness often caused her brother to be very unhappy.
Isabel!
Her mother was unhappy too. Well, on this particular day, like many others, Isabel had caused a lot of people to be unhappy. And that night, some very strange things started to happen.
Isabel?
Isabel!
Isabel!
Was she just dreaming? Or were these things really happening? She didn't know. She knew that everything seemed very strange, and it was time to go to school. She remembered about the puppet. It belonged to a girl at school. The girl had bought it for all the children to share, and then she let Isabel take it home. It wasn't Isabel's, so, of course, she didn't take care of it.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Isabel. I brought your puppet back. Oh, good. What'd you do to it? It's all messed up. I don't know. I just played with it. You ruined it.
And then, as she was walking away, something strange started to happen. She heard all those funny voices. She started spinning around and around, and Isabel started changing around and around until Isabel became the girl. The messed up puppet was hers now. She didn't like having a messed up puppet. And then, around and around, Isabel was herself again. But funny, she still felt unhappy. She still remembered feeling as if the ruined puppet was really her own. She knew how the girl felt. Uh-oh. Looks like more trouble. Know why? That's right. Isabel had forgotten to clean the brushes, and she didn't put the lids on the paint jars the last time she used them. And then it happened again, round and round. Now Isabel was the one who had to use the dried up paint and brushes. Isabel didn't like that at all. After she became herself again, she still remembered that awful feeling. It wasn't fun using spoiled things. And at the library...
Hey, Isabel, where's that book you were reading from yesterday about fairy tales? Let me see. Here it is. What'd you do? It's all dirty. I don't know, I just read it.
Now Isabel had the messy book. Isabel had changed into a lot of people. Now she knew how bad everyone felt when they had to use things that she hadn't taken care of.
Yeah.
Like the ring.
Oh, I found one.
Here's another.
We can prove we don't got 4 rings.
And later at the community center, she was really worried.
Not over there.
She didn't like using things she hadn't taken care of, and there were lots of them here. Lots of people were unhappy with Isabel, and now Isabel was finding out how bad all of them felt. Isabel sure didn't like that. Isabel thought at last it was over. But those sad feelings, they just lasted and lasted. They lasted until she got home, and they didn't stop there. Now she knew how unhappy she had made her brother feel. And her mother, too. Things got stranger and stranger. She kept spinning around and around until... Was it really morning now? Had all that been a dream? Isabel didn't really care. Now she really knew how bad other people felt because of the things she did. She realized how important it was to care for the things she shared with other people. And she wanted to show all those people that she had made unhappy that she was going to change. And she did, too. She stopped making other people unhappy. And she found out that it wasn't so hard to take care of the things she had to share with others. It was just as easy as taking care of her own things. Everybody was happy with Isabel now. And making people happy made Isabel feel very good.
Alright, so we have seen that one before, but it was more than 2 years ago, and it's so nuts that I really enjoy showing it. Excuse me. So I wrote an article some time ago talking about... I'm going to fix this while I'm talking to you. Wrote about how Coronet and Encyclopedia Britannica got a little wacky in the late 60s and early 70s. And incorporated really crazy things and scenes, try to get kids interested in the message. One of the examples, of course, was Parents Who Needs Them, which had an evil puppet that turned a little boy invisible until he realized how important his parents were to his life. All right, so I got another film set up. And this one is called Briar Rose. It's a fairy tale. I mean, you could say the last film was a fairy tale, but here we go. Enjoy. and get the tension back on this scanner so we can watch this. And here we go.
This is the story of Briar Rose, the Sleeping Beauty.
Sounds like my computer just crashed. Wow. All right, let's learn about discussion in democracy.
Something ought to be done about all these fires in town.
Oh, Howard, there's no reason to get excited just because of a few fires. And besides, what can we do about it?
Well, what about Mr. Johnson's store, Betty? They say the fire should have been put out sooner.
Well, I don't think that was the fault
Oh,
of the
how
fire
can you
department.
say that,
Nobody
Alice?
turned in the alarm.
How do you know? Do you have any facts?
That's what I heard.
Sorry for Mr. Johnson, but it was such an old store. Maybe with the insurance money, he can build a new one that would look much better.
Oh, you're just not using your head, Alice.
That's right.
If there are too many fires in...
Hold it. This is no way to carry on a discussion, is it? Let's see what happens when a discussion group is prepared, organized.
So, besides providing more equipment, purchase of a new fire engine would save a lot of time. They could get to fires faster.
Is that right? Alice, perhaps you have some information on that.
According to the chief at Glendale, they could go a lot faster now if they wanted to, but they always drive as fast as it's safe to drive.
Oh, I see. Well, I didn't know that. Well, perhaps a new fire engine wouldn't save much time after all.
Can we all agree on that?
Yes.
All right.
You see, that proves my point.
Well, now, just a minute, Alice. Suppose we let Howard finish his presentation of the facts.
I believe the advantages can be summed up.
This is the same discussion group properly prepared, with someone leading the discussion. They are beginning to accomplish things. Why? What is a good discussion? What makes a good discussion leader? If you were elected to lead this discussion, what would you do? Well, one of Peter's first moves was to call on one of the city councilmen, Mr. Stewart.
Well, our class in American Problems has been studying the discussions of the city council. We heard that you were talking about the problem of fire safety here in Glendale.
That's good. We're glad to have students interested in the business of the city. Now, what can I do for you?
Well, I came to ask if we, Glendale High School that is, could do anything for you, for the city council. The classes have elected representatives to a committee on fire safety. If we present our recommendations to the city council, are you interested?
Well, I think the council would be very pleased to hear from the students. We're getting recommendations from the Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women Voters, and other community groups. You know, when people get together to think about and discuss a problem and reach conclusions, that's the way true democracies work.
I'm glad the council will consider the school's recommendations. But there is something you can do for me. You see, I was elected to lead the discussion, and I wondered if you could give me some advice. I'm afraid we'll just have an argument that doesn't get anywhere.
Well, to have an effective discussion, you, as leader, must help these people to agree. Not agree with you, but with each other. At least find your majority point of view. We have many discussions here in the council, just as they do in the state and national government. There are three important factors in any discussion. Preparation. You must learn the important facts about your topic by reading or by talking to people who know. Planning. Your group should get together beforehand and make up an outline of what you're to do. Personalities. Considering what must be done and who can do it best. As the leader, it's up to you to help them work together. All right?
I think I have the idea, Mr. Stewart.
Just remember this. Each member of the group should prepare, plan, think of personalities, especially the leader, because the leader must guide the discussion to some conclusion and agreements. In that way, a discussion is not a worthless argument. It's a means to democratic action.
Democratic action. Well, that seems to be what's going on here. And it's partly because each one did prepare himself by reading. And Peter did plan an outline. And he thought of the personalities involved. Someone had to find out about Glendale's firefighting staff. When the personalities of the people were considered, it was decided that Alice would do the best job of interviewing. So she visited the Glendale fire station to learn about the present staff and their methods. What could be done there to improve fire safety? Let's see how well Alice prepared herself.
To sum up, it appears as though the chief is doing an excellent job, considering his men and his equipment. However, he is short of men, and the salary offered is so low that there have been no applicants for the jobs for over a year.
Well, all right. I recommend that he hire more men,
Just a
right?
moment, Betty. We haven't heard all the factors that were investigated yet. Howard, suppose you give us some information on the purchase of a new engine.
As you suggested, I checked into the question of buying a new fire engine.
Yes, of those in the group, Howard is best suited to this investigation. Howard likes to tinker with old cars. He knows about the new ones, too. So Peter suggested that Howard visit a nearby town where a new fire engine was already in use. What were the pros and cons of a new engine? Did it really improve fire safety? And Howard went one step further. He wrote to manufacturers for technical information on a variety of new engines.
So you see, besides added safety for the firemen and more chemical equipment, these new engines have better pumps. I believe that this fire truck will more than pay for itself in terms of increased efficiency in putting out fires.
Well, we're getting to your part of the discussion, Betty. What's the story on cost of fire damage and money that can be spent to reduce it?
Local statistics show that each year the citizens of Glendale lose thousands of dollars.
Betty's interest in accounting was in choosing her for the investigation of costs. Betty prepared herself for the discussion by telephone and personal interview. She also made inquiries by letter, so she could plan her remarks on the cost factors of fire safety.
This fire damage costs the citizens of Glendale the equivalent of salaries for 40 firemen, even at the proposed higher pay scales. But increased city treasury allotments for more pay mean higher taxes. Higher taxes for a long time. Why, we'll even be paying taxes for this.
Well, let's pause and see what our information adds up to. It appears that a new fire engine would be desirable, but would really not improve fire safety until more firemen were added to the staff. However, the city treasury does not provide for the increased salaries necessary to attract more men. Are we agreed?
Yeah, that's just about it.
All right. Betty, will you jot this down?
Yes, Betty's handling of facts and data make her a good choice as secretary. Sometimes a permanent record is important.
And therefore, we, the students of Glendale High School, recommend that the City Council approve higher pay for firemen, even though this means increased taxes.
If the council acts on our recommendation, that'll improve things after a while. But what about right? What can be done immediately to reduce the losses due to fire?
Well, you can't put out fires without firemen.
Yes, but if you could reduce the number of fires...
What was it someone said about, fire prevention?
Prevention, of course. Maybe some fires could be prevented. Somebody ought to organize an educational campaign. But who?
Maybe the school.
Yes, we can help the city have a campaign. Meetings with demonstrations.
Posters all over the town. Letters to town clubs.
And discussion groups to arouse interest. So, is it agreed? A fire prevention campaign. Okay, now here's our immediate program for action. Now, as soon as we agree on who'll do what, we'll work out a letter for Betty to write to the City Council. Action we recommend, and action we ourselves will accomplish.
Now here's a successful discussion. The group has considered the important information and arrived at conclusions. Reminds you of something Mr. Stewart said, doesn't it?
Each member of the group should prepare, plan, think of personalities, especially the leader, because the leader must guide the discussion to some conclusions and agreements. That way, a discussion is not a worthless argument. It's a means to democratic action.
This is the story of Briar Rose, the Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago, there lived a king and queen who said every day, "Ah, if only we could have a child." It seemed to them that they had waited forever when an unexpected thing happened. One day, while the queen was bathing, a frog crept out of the water onto the land and spoke to her. "Your wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has passed, you shall have a daughter." What the frog said came true, and the queen brought a beautiful child into the world. The parents thought her so lovely they could hardly contain their joy. And the king ordered a great celebration. "The honor of your presence is requested at the castle in celebration of the birth of a royal princess." Not only did he invite their relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but also the wise women who could use their magic powers to enrich the baby's life. There were 13 of these honored women in the kingdom, but as the king had only 12 golden plates and feared that nothing else would be good enough, one of the wise women could not be invited. After a splendid feast, the 12 wise women bestowed upon the baby many virtues, naming everything of true value in this world. "I give you compassion, inner beauty, and riches of the spirit. Our gifts are laughter, and tears. I give you hope. And wisdom. And imagination. We offer friendship and love. I bless you with self-knowledge. But when 11 had spoken, the 13th appeared, and furious at being left out, she raged. The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead. You can imagine everyone's shock. Fortunately, the 12th wise woman had not yet spoken, and she stepped forward. She had no power to undo the spell, but only to soften it. So she said, "It shall not be death into which the princess shall fall, but a deep sleep of 100 years." All of the wise women's fond wishes for the child came true. She grew to be so lovely and modest, and gentle, and wise that she was cherished by everyone. And the king, who wanted dearly to protect his child from the evil spell, ordered that every spindle in the kingdom be destroyed. Believing that he had thus ensured his daughter's safety, he accepted a duty which took him and the queen away from the castle on the very day his daughter became 15. To pass the long day alone in the castle, the princess let her curiosity lead her wherever it would. Through enormous rooms and into darkened corners, through passageways and into bedchambers she wandered, exploring every nook of the castle until she came to an old tower, wherein a narrow, winding staircase beckoned her. At the top, she found a little door with a rusty key, and when she turned it, the door sprang open, and there, hidden away in a little room, sat an old woman spinning her flax. "Good day, old mother," said the king's daughter. "What are you doing there?" "I am spinning," said the old woman, and nodded her head. "What sort of thing is that, rattling around so merrily?" asked the girl. And scarcely had she reached for the spindle when she pricked her finger with it, and the magic decree was fulfilled, for she fell down upon the old woman's bed and was overcome by a deep sleep, which quickly spread over the entire castle. Downstairs, the king and queen, who had just returned and entered the great hall, were overcome by sleep. The horses, too, went to sleep in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons upon the roof, the flies on the wall. Even the fire on the hearth quieted and slept, and the roast stopped frizzling. And the cook, who was just about to pull the hair of the lazy scullery boy, let him go and went to sleep. And the wind fell, and on the trees before the castle, not a leaf moved again. All around the castle, a briar hedge with thorns as sharp as claws began to grow. Each year it grew higher, until finally it surrounded and covered the entire castle. So at last there was nothing left to be seen, not even the flags on the roof. And the story of the Sleeping Beauty, whom people began to call Briar Rose, was told far and wide. And as time went on, many were the tales told of kings' sons who tried to pass through the thorny hedge, but could not, for the briars held fast together as if they had hands. And still the story grew, to tell of young princes who had been hopelessly caught and had perished among the thorns. After many, many years, there came another prince into the country. He chanced to hear an old, old man recounting the tale of Briar Rose, asleep in a thorn-covered castle, and of the many young men who had tried to no avail to break through the cruel hedge. But the youth said, "I am not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful Briar Rose." The old man tried to dissuade him, but the prince would not listen. It just so happened that the 100 years had finally passed, and this was the dawning of the very day when Briar Rose was to awaken. So that when the prince approached the thorn hedge, the briars suddenly blossomed into wondrous flowers which parted and let him pass unharmed, and then closed once more behind him. In the castle yard, the prince saw the horses and the spotted hounds asleep, and on the roof, the pigeons roosted with their heads under their wings. Inside the castle, the fly slept on the wall, and the sleeping cook still held out his hand to grab the lazy scullery boy, and the kitchen maid sat absolutely still, with a hen in front of her that needed plucking. And further on, he saw the king and queen asleep in the great hall, and on he went and found only stillness. At last, he discovered the narrow stairway and climbed it, and opened the little door where Briar Rose lay sleeping. And there she was, so beautiful that he could not turn his eyes away. And he stooped down and tenderly kissed her, and her eyes opened, and she smiled gently. Then they went down together, and the king awoke and the queen, and looked at one another in astonishment. And in the castle yard, the horses stood up and shook themselves. The spotted hounds jumped up and wagged their tails. The pigeons on the roof lifted their heads from under their wings, looked about, and flew into the open country. The flies on the wall crept again. The fire in the hearth flamed up, and the meat began to frizzle. And the cook gave the kitchen boy such a box on the ears that he let out a howl. And the kitchen maid at long last plucked the chicken. And so the prince and Briar Rose were soon married in splendor. And they lived in contentment for the rest of their days.
That was weird. I don't know why it stopped this time. I think the scanner's haunted today. Yeah, so there it is, Briar Rose. Now you know. And knowing is half the battle. This next film is in conjunction with Black History Month. I've been trying to pull out films that have relevance to Black history, and which means that we're exploring more of our collection, and this gives me a reason to do it. So this is Interview with Bruce Johnson, and I believe Bruce Johnson was someone who was actively campaigning to get blacks registered to vote in Alabama, and this is an interview with him. Enjoy.
I'm sort of just an easy-going, fun-loving sort of guy. Big Blaze at 22 years old, February the 9th, 1941. I got out of high school, man. I've been around about as long as I can remember, man. It just seems like something basic in this life sort of, something in there that just doesn't go. Well, anyway, when I was born, my father wanted to call me Aloysius, but mother had the upper hand, so they just called me Bruce. And threw on Gordon, since that was the family name. And after getting out of high school, I went to college for a semester CCNY. And before I completed, I quit and joined the Army. I was 17, young and wild. And joined the Army, spent 3 years there. Managed to make a year in Korea in the 60 to 61. I kicked Sigmund Rhee out. And from Korea, I came back to the States, to Fort Gordon, Georgia. That's when I really got a very good taste of the South down there. Really got out into town and made all the mistakes, sat on the front of the bus and walked into the wrong restaurants and asked for movie tickets and really started to find out what the segregation really meant. And it was sort of really new to me. I mean, I'd experienced it once or twice in New York, but it'd been in the form of, you're a nigger, and I'm not a nigger, and you punch me in the nose, anytime they use the magic word. But I didn't, really know, didn't really dig this. All right, they called me a nigger. I know this was supposed to be wrong because I was told it was wrong to be a nigger and call a boy, and I'm supposed to react violently to this. But it got to be a burden being a Negro, so anytime I was called a nigger, I just, passed it off for a soldier-old man or something like that. I spent about a year in Atlanta, Georgia, where I met Julian Bond and James Foreman and John Lewis and Ivanhoe and a bunch of the other guys that were with the movement, and more or less talked to them, don't buy black, buy guns, and things like that. But finally I came around to this nonviolent aspect of the movement, and I got more and more interested, and so I quit school. I was going to I just transferred out of Morris Brown to Clark, and quit school and quit the job I had out at Lockheed Aircraft Corporation and became a field secretary for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. To tell you the truth, I could care less about this town of Summer. I don't intend to live here. There's very little here that interests me. I'm not that much interested in the people. But if I'm to become someone, somebody else must be something. I can only find me through finding someone else. Self-seekers seldom find themselves. Human beings, to be able to relate to another human being, to be able to think with another human being, to be able to enter into some sort of relationship with another human being, to be able to see the tree as he sees it. No two men ever see the same tree. I mean, all right, we recognize it's got a bark, out of a woody substance, it must have roots, it must stand up straight, it has leaves, and there's the oxygen, carbon dioxide cycle, and it gives off moisture and this, that, and the other, but the tree. No two men really ever see the same tree, and if I can possibly understand how someone else sees the tree, maybe my own vision becomes a bit clearer. If I can understand how another man thinks, even though his thinking is counter to mine, even though he doesn't quite agree with me, maybe I can come to a little better understanding of how I think, and more important, why I think the way I do. So hence this movement, and hence Selma, Alabama. If I'm to be free in New York, these people must be free down here. I'm tied to them whether I want to or not. And not just by color, by the mere fact that we were all created in this great being's image. He does exist. I mean, not to get on any morality kick of whether God exists or whether he doesn't exist, but for all this orderly chaos to result by pure accident is a little too fantastic to conceive. For all these feelings and emotions, these things that just don't quite fit, that dissatisfaction that sex and food and drink just doesn't satisfy, this thing that still lurks there and it's charged and it nudges you every so often, it pushes you, it keeps trying to struggle up into you. I believe that's something that lies way outside the being, far, far outside the being. All right, it sounds like straight melodrama, you know what I mean? But it's there, let's face it. This is what causes the whites to react as they do down here. Something else is tugging at them. Something else is trying to get in there. Something else is trying to communicate its way through, and it's a little bit too terrible to recognize. It's a little bit too much to bite off and chew. I'd much rather believe this way. I don't really want to accept this. It's easier for me to go along the way we've been going. Something else is rattling around in their minds. Some other little thing that they can't really put their finger on it. They can't really articulate it. It's the ghost that always lies in the peripheral vision. Every time I try to swing my vision around to focus on it, it always moves behind a boulder or a stump or disappears just over the horizon. But it's there, and it's maddeningly there. And either I must get it or remove it, one or the other. Either I must have it or wipe it out, destroy it. And me with my black skin and my woolly hair personifies this little thing that keeps dodging, ducking out of the way. But the only trouble is I don't dodge and duck. I stand right there. And the only thing they can do now is either close their eyes and ignore the problem. The Negroes here are happy. We got happy race relations here in this state and in this city for more than 100 years. Or either reach out and try to violently crush it down. Throw a bomb in the church. Throw poison candy at children. Use cattle prods on demonstrators and pack them into filthy jails. But it just doesn't work. No matter how happy they say I am, I'm not. No slave can ever be really happy except if the slave just becomes utterly lost. And this is a vile thing. I'm not going to go back to that place. And don't want to take over what the whites have here. I don't want all those ulcers and pains. All I want to do is just exemplify me, just be me. If me wants to kick off the shoes and run through woods, let me do it. If me wants to spout poetry at the moon, let me do it. If me wants to go in here and just sit down and look at the four walls and not bother anybody, then let me do it. And don't tell me I can't because, boy, you're black. Don't tell me I can't because your hair is woolly or your eyes are slanted or your lips are too thick or your nose is too big. That's all I want. I don't necessarily want to sit next to a white person on the bus. I'm not, whites smell a little bit too sometimes when they don't bathe. You understand what I mean? I don't necessarily want to work next beside whites because I'll tell you the truth, whites are lazier than we are. We've got to work to make that little bit of money that we're going to have. You people don't have to. You got this big union to take care of you and everything, you got Social Security to pay you off, and we're not really making enough to make ends meet as is, and so we really got to slave hard if we want to go down to the Splo House or Shine House, to get a little drink and then run around to the other houses to have a little fun here and there also. We got to really work. See, we can't afford to be lazy. The only reason we're moving slow is because at the end of the day, if you work a 16-hour day out here in some of these cotton fields I've seen out here pulling garbage on some of these trucks, you'd move a bit slow too at the end of a 16-hour day. At least I know I would. So the whites are now confronted with this. And this is a general thing throughout the entire movement, whether you take it from Danville, Virginia, all the way down to Little Rock, Arkansas. The human being is still the same. The human being that's caught up in these situations, though his method of expression might be different, but what motivates him to this expression is still the same. The thing inside is still the same, whether it's Governor Orville Forbes closing the schools and having the National Guard have to open them again, or whether it's Prince Edward County just shutting the schools down entirely and saying we give up the public school system. The method of expression is different, granted. But what motivates this expression is the same. We don't want them niggers around us. Because to face that black man, I've got to face myself. To face what I've inflicted on him. To face the castrations, the lynchings, the beatings, the Klan ridings. To face coming in there and taking his women and just treating them like dirt. To face this. Not that he's going to react and do the same thing to me, but that I could do this to a human being. That I could actually call myself a Christian, a civilized man, and be like this to a fellow man. This is a little bit too much for anybody to swallow. And there's no excuse to fall back on. We didn't have any war or fight with you to cause you to put us down like this. We didn't have any big rebellions or uprisings that want to change your way of life so radically to make you do this. It was your own greed and cheap labor that made you want to do this. It was you selling yourself out for a buck and King Cotton that made you take a human being and mutilate him. Now this is just a plain simple fact. I can't see anything else for it. I don't see why else you need slaves except to work. I don't think you just want slaves just standing around just to say, I got slaves. I mean, this is a bit impractical. You got to feed them, you got to stick them in a house someplace. So you must want something out of a slave. You want his labor. He is the object upon which you vent your anger and your lust. He provides psychological crutches to you in that way, and he provides economic crutches to you in the other way. He provides military crutches to you if you can brainwash him enough to fight for you. So this is the real reason. And you've done this to human beings. You've violated the law of God by doing it. You violated the law of man by doing it, and now you must pay. But even then you're getting off light, in that you don't have to pay physically. You're getting off light, but you're getting off really heavy, in that you have to pay by a spiritual awakening. You have to pay by a mental awakening. And this is sometimes a very hard price to pay. Now, how is all this applicable here in Selma, Alabama? Well, we tried street demonstrations. Street demonstrations were put down quickly and harshly. Al Lingo moved in with his cattle prods. The sheriff deputized 300 men, great big posse now. They filled the county jails. They filled the city jails. The trials, naturally, were all miscarriages of justice. So now we're leaning away from these street demonstrations. Now we're starting to reach out and grasp at the vote. He actually did us a favor. The white power structure here, this is a term that's been misused, I realize that, but it's the best term I can think of at the moment. The white power structure actually did us a favor by forcing us out of the streets, back into our homes and back into our churches, thinking that we'd go back to this place. We can't go back there now. But we had to use our minds. How else can we bring about the change? The vote. The vote. The prime thing in this American life, of the people, by the people, for the people. That vote. And we're doing it without demonstrating. We're doing it without mass arrests or head beatings. We're doing it slowly, day by day. Trying to vote has also forced us to raise the intellectual standard, to raise the literacy standard here, because many of the people are illiterate. They haven't had the opportunities of good schools. And so we've been forced to educate them and train them so that they can get past the voter registration tests. And just a little taste of knowledge is so sweet to them that they want more. They hunger and they thirst for it. They want to know how to read and write. They want to know how to spell correctly. They want to know how to add and subtract. And so we're beginning to set up schools for them here. The white man is reacting very badly to all of this. So far, the people, the townspeople themselves, haven't reacted violently because they've placed their confidence and trust in their police department. The police can hold them niggas in line. But we're slowly showing them that they can't hold us in line, that we're going to come forward no matter what happens, no matter what you do. This is going to come about. For most of them, I actually believe that the majority of the people here really want to see this come about. Inside, way down inside, they realize this is right. But they get into a conflict up here. This filter that reacts between the senses that bring in the world from the outside, and it filters it down to the soul. And it filters the soul reaction back and up into the outside world again. This little filter that's conditioned to environment. The eyes aren't conditioned to environment. They'll just see. I mean, all right, if you live in a cave, you see in the dark a little bit better, but the eyes still just see. And the soul is not conditioned to environment. The heart is not conditioned to environment. Only the mind, that little thing in between, that id, I guess you'd call it. I'm not much of a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but it seems like this interpretive device sort of blocks them. For too long they've been taught, and they know that, well, Negroes are lazy. Negroes don't bathe too often. I'm going to talk about haircuts with this little bush I got up here. I need a bone through my nose, really. I either go African or get a haircut, or one or the other. But at any rate, these things are suddenly just proved. The intellect just doesn't quite know how to react. Nothing has been really put in its place that they can accept. All of a sudden they must accept this person as an individual that is just as good and sometimes better than I am. And they really can't do that. It's really not a human reaction. It takes a lot more to love than to hate. It takes so much more to react with kindness than to react with violence. It really calls for an exercising of the mind, the heart, and the soul in a unison, in a symbiosis that gives rise to an actual individual, instead of just to a violent beast that really doesn't mean much one way or the other. So far things have been more or less feeling their way here in Selma at this particular point. They didn't really know how to react. Would the Negroes come back again to register to vote? And we have. Would they continue coming in such a greater number? And we have. And now it's more or less, we're waiting for the white reaction. Will they react violently? Will they try to counter our moves in one way or another? We know they're going to counter our moves. We know they're going to do something, but really don't know what. If I may predict and project a bit, they're going to react violently for a while. And then they're finally going to accept it. Somebody's going to call a halt to the violence, and they're going to look around at the wreckage and begin to rebuild again, begin to piece it back together again. This is ultimately what we're working for, this coming together. And we're trying to do it politically, we're trying to do it socially, we're trying to do it without violence, but it's the whites that are actually pushing it to violence. It's the whites that are actually suddenly reacting because they're also afraid that we're going to inflict on them what they know they have inflicted on us. And we're not going to. I don't want revenge. Revenge is silly. The solution to this entire problem is so maddeningly simple.
Phenomenal. The reason I like this is it's a long, they just let the film go. There's very little edits. It's all just this conversation, and it's not really a conversation. It's just Bruce Gordon talking, and kind of capturing the climate of what was happening during the civil rights movement, and I love films like this because it's not this interplay. You know, a lot of times civil rights movement gets reduced down to some marches, protesters getting attacked by the police in those towns, then Martin Luther King, and that's it. You get 30 seconds. And this was a long form and was really fascinating. Kind of really puts its finger on the pulse of what was going on. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for dealing with all the technical problems. I'm going to have to exercise the scanner and try to figure out what's going on. If you like what you saw, hit thumbs up, hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies. You can hit the super thanks button and pay a little donation to us if you'd like. You can also go to ko-fi.com/abgeeks. That will buy us some coffee, which we drink. And you can also go to patreon.com/abgeeks, and that's kind of like a subscription tip jar. You can also just go to the YouTube channel at AB Geeks and watch some films that we put online. Because we put a lot of films online. I think it's more than 5,000. And for my collection and others' collections. And there's little ads that show up. And that's how we get a couple of pennies at a time. So thanks again for tuning in and for your comments. And I'm going to sneeze. Woo! I was going to try to go turn it off before I sneeze, but it didn't work. But in the meantime, please rewind. Love each other. And we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday, right? Yeah, all right. Talk soon.